For the third part of my series on interior modeling for the Vega, I was going to do the dashboard, and if you notice, there were two different dashboard designs that I discovered online. I've opted for this one because I think it was more common. I don't know what the options were actually. This is an interesting question. But in any case, the most basic way to model a dashboard is just to do one plane and then texture it. Many modelers are satisfied with this, surprisingly, and in Redline's cars were originally built this way. Not mine, but the ones that came with the game. But I'm going to be more realistic, and that makes this the most complicated part of the modeling process, because as you can see, the shape of a Vega dashboard is deceptively complicated, actually. So first of all, I need to do it in two sections to start with. There'll be more as I move on. So I then have to add the top of it there, because like most General Motors dashboards, it has a top on it, and that's where you put your defrosters and your stereo speakers and so on. And again, I'm trying to do a lot of sections so that I don't have vertices which are unconnected. This is to avert errors later, even if it's more complicated to do this way. And the model, as of the time I finished this portion of it, was incomplete. I noticed one face was missing on the far left of the dash, which you'll notice later. And so this is just the beginning. And this took me about 55 minutes of work, so I've greatly edited this video down. So there, notice I've jutted it out a little bit, because indeed it is not flat. Very few dashboards are. Actually, even Model T dashboards and Model A dashboards were a little bit slanted. So now I'm subdividing the lower part of it here because it's curved back. It's curved back into the footwell. And then I'm doing some cleanup on the side there. This is much of what I omitted from the video, is that I had to constantly go back and clean up messy vertices. Now there's a little lip on it you can see in the photo that I'm trying to do. It's really more of like a groove. So there I have to do the bottom part of it. So then I'm subdividing the lower parts of the dash, because if you look carefully in the photo, you can see that that's where the radio and the cigarette lighter and other things were placed. Both the gauges and the controls were inset in the dashboard on the Vega. There I'm trying to make the top level and flat. Now, of course, this will be relatively invisible to anybody using the model, but as I said before, it's better to close a model to the extent that you can. You don't want to have too many holes in it. In this case, it's somewhat unavoidable, but I'm going to try and make the model as closed as I can make it. So this has to be closed there, of course, in the corner. And there's a panel where the, well, not the instruments, but the knobs and controls will go. And then I have to get rid of the old plane in the back there and replace it with a new one in the front, which is actually in two portions, so I have to put in a new plane. This is a rare case of my consolidating it into one. So there I'm closing the model again, making sure that's, as I said, as closed as it can be. Will it ever be 100%? Well, Probably not in this situation, but I prefer for it to be relatively closed. And then I have to close that edge there where you wouldn't really be able to know that was there unless you were in real life and you ran your fingers up in there. But again, I'm trying to avoid errors. Now the instruments are inset as well, so it's necessary to completely remodel that part of the dash. I had to pull out the original faces and I'm going to replace them. But first I have to get rid of these other faces, which are now obsolete. They have to be refitted. Again, another new face to fit the new model. Because it constantly changes as I work on it. A lot of this is compromise. Of course, after I do all this detail, it still won't be accurate to the original, partly because I don't have the real drawings with the actual measurements. But it's a matter of compromising between a flat plane and a texture and a perfect model, which with my resources isn't really possible. So here I'm going to try and line it up properly with the bell housing, which itself is a guess. The bell housing dimensions are not by any means proven correct, and I suspect they may be an inch or two off even. So there, I'm checking the photo again. It's nice if you can have a photo that's perfectly aligned that you can trace, but with interior photos it's almost never possible. Unless the parts have been pulled out of the car and photographed for eBay or something, you don't usually get that lucky. And in this case I didn't, because Vega parts are actually very rare. This has been a problem all through the project in that it's very hard to find comprehensive collections of parts. Even back in the day, they refused Vegas from junkyards even because nobody wanted them because of all the reliability issues. And so junkyards didn't even bother to pull the parts off them. So if you have a Vega today, this is, I'm sure, part of the challenge of owning one. They may have debugged many of the technical problems later on, but the problem now is you have to get parts. And at the time, most people had given up by the time they were going to the junkyard. So by extension, if I'm doing a model, I have to do a lot of guesswork, actually. I have to look at photos and try and copy what I see in a more of an artistic way than an engineering way. I know that this inset without the gauges is more shallow than the one with gauges. So I have to make two different insets. And I mean, again, this is sort of perfectionism, but I'm trying to have some detail in this, of course. And if it becomes too high poly later, well, this is one of the things that I can omit. I can just make this all one inset. But when you consider how complicated this shape is, I don't think that this model is particularly high poly if you consider that I want it to work in a range of different games with moderate demands, at least, in terms of connected vertices and so on. So there is the finished product, sort of. You can notice there's a missing face back there over on the left. I'm going to have to fix that later.